committee will come to order. And thank you to our nominees, Mr. Schwitzer, Mr. Churello, Mr. Stewart, and Mr. Tyer. Congratulations on your nominations, and thank you for all of you for your willingness to serve. We will first hear from Rick Schwitzer, who is nominated to serve as the Deputy United States Trade Representative for Asia, Textiles, Investment, Services, and Intellectual Property. Mr. Schwitzer has over 25 years of experience advancing U.S. strategic interests both domestically and internationally. Throughout his career as a Foreign Service Officer at the Department of State, he negotiated international agreements, expanded market access for U.S. businesses, and protected American firms from unfair trade practices such as intellectual property theft and forced technology transfer. I look forward to working with him, if confirmed, to ensure that USTR implements policies that promote U.S. competitiveness, build supply chain resilience, and address emerging global challenges. Next, we will hear from Gus Churello, who is nominated to serve as the Assistant Secretary for Financial Resources at the Department of Health and Human Services. The ASFR is responsible for providing advice and guidance to the Secretary on all aspects of the budget, financial management, acquisition policy, and grants supervision. If confirmed, Mr. Churello would play a vital role in managing and overseeing the allocation of resources across the full range of HHS programs. His experience in consumer protection, regulatory reform, competition, and antitrust issues will make him a valuable addition to the HHS team. As an attorney who served at both the Federal Trade Commission and with the House Judiciary Committee, he is prepared to ensure that HHS resources are stewarded to benefit all Americans. We will also hear from Mike Stewart, who is nominated to serve as General Counsel of HHS. The General Counsel supports the development and implementation of the Department's programs by providing the highest quality legal services to the Secretary and the organization's various agencies and divisions. Mr. Stewart will be instrumental in making sure that new laws and regulations are effectively implemented at HHS. He is well suited for the position given his decades of legal experience, including previous service as the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of West Virginia. His experience prosecuting cases related to the opioid crisis and Medicaid fraud demonstrates a strong commitment to protect patients and root out waste and abuse in healthcare systems. And finally, we will hear from Derek Tyer, who is nominated to serve as Deputy Undersecretary for Legislative Affairs at the Treasury Department. The Deputy Undersecretary is responsible for advising the Secretary on congressional relations matters in order to assist in the formulation of policy and to determine the overall direction of the department. Mr. Tyer is a veteran of Capitol Hill and undoubtedly understands the importance of keeping Congress informed of departmental actions. Given his experience, I also expect him to prioritize timeliness in responding to inquiries from Congress. Thank you again to our nominees for their time today, and with that, I recognize Ranking Member Wyden for his opening remarks.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. We're going to talk to four nominees, as you noted, for Deputy United States Trade Representative covering Asia and a number of key sectors of the economy, including textiles. This is a key position, Mr. Schwitzer. Based on the answers the committee received in a discussion with a number of the nominees, I'm worried that Americans are going to get hurt on their watch if they're confirmed. At this point, the burden of proof is on the nominees to show that they'll bring a fresh approach to a presidential administration that's made chaos and pain its calling card. I'm going to start off with the nominee to be General Counsel of HHS, Michael Stewart. Health Department's top lawyer is responsible for calling balls and strikes and making sure the department follows the law. Needless to say, Robert Kennedy and Donald Trump has shown little interest of that. The administration's slash-and-burn approach to running the country may satisfy some of the people on the far right, but it's causing real harm to communities and families. Republicans have now dealt the biggest blow to the Medicaid program in the history of the program. Robert Kennedy is gutting the federal bodies that decide which vaccines Americans get and which preventive tests like cancer screenings are encouraged. They've ended funding for cancer research. They're systematically dismantling Head Start, threatening the early education that starts kids and families walking economic tightropes off on the right foot. Donald Trump and Robert Kennedy have already shown that they have little interest in upholding an important federal law known as EMTALA that protects women and mothers. Robert Kennedy has kept up DOJ's chaos by playing 52-card pickup with agencies and federal workers who are responsible for helping keep seniors, kids, and Americans with disability and working families healthy and safe. The Trump Health Department is now in court on the taxpayer dime defending these actions, which I think are unquestionably reckless. This is the direct result of HHS's flawed interpretations and sometimes disregard of federal law. Mr. Stewart would be squarely responsible for advising the department about these legal questions. The real question is, how does somebody approach the role of being in-house counsel for an administration that has turned violating the law into what amounts to a Olympic sport? So I'm going to be looking today for evidence that these nominees are not going to be another rubber stamp for these crusades. And next up, we have Gustav Churello, nominated to be the Assistant Secretary for Financial Resources at HHS. This nominee will be responsible for the department's substantial budget, as well as the distribution of grants and other financial issues. We looked at his resume, and here I was troubled about the overall lack of background managing the finances of any organization, let alone one of the largest in the country. Now, given the Trump administration's self-proclaimed interest in the federal budget, it seems to me there would have been the possibility of finding somebody with a background into actually managing things. It's an important role, especially in light of the administration's weaponizing of federal grants to punish and pressure political opponents. Members of this committee ought to be looking for impartiality and independence from political influence for a role that touches the lives of so many communities across the nation. I mentioned already Brian Schwitzer. He's nominated to be Deputy U.S. Trade Representative, an important position right now as we look at upcoming deadlines. From day one, Donald Trump's trade agenda has been nothing short of disastrous. Basically, it consists of a few lines on a napkin for the most part and a lot of flip-flopping on tariffs. And farmers, businesses, and workers are left in limbo. Something I felt very strongly about and spoke about on the floor, because this roller coaster of uncertainty is causing huge harm to the farmers. For example, I say to the chairman, in our part of the world, the wheat farmers told me, you know, our prices are down, that's a big problem, our input costs are up, but Ron, go back there and tell everybody in DC, at least give us some certainty. Give us some certainty, give us some predictability. That's the kind of leadership that we would like. Finally, that brings us to Derek Tyer, nominated to serve as Deputy Undersecretary of the Treasury. Certainly during the first 6 months in office, Donald Trump has managed to weaponize nearly every corner of the Treasury Department to target his enemies or those who disagree with him, and that has been to the detriment of the country. Mr. Tyer is well known to this committee. I certainly hope that he can make some improvements down there. Folks know that we work very closely together on a bipartisan effort in the last Congress to try to deal with taxes. But the reality is right now, among the current class of Trump appointees, even familiar nominees have been put into situations that they simply cannot address the public interest. Unfortunately, trust is long gone with this Treasury Department that's turning the IRS against taxpayers and looking out for the wealthy and powerful at everybody else's response. I know there's going to be questions for Mr. Tyer today. I want to thank our nominees for being here. I look forward to question and answers. Thank you, Senator Crapo.
Thank you, Senator Wyden. And in a moment, our nominees will share their opening statements. Before doing so, I'll provide a short introduction of each nominee. I've already given a partial introduction during my opening comments. But Mr. Schwitzer served as a Foreign Service officer in the State Department for over 20 years. Most recently as Director of Policy and Strategy for the Special Envoy Office for Critical and Emerging Technology. He was also previously a member of the Secretary of State's Policy Planning Council and a senior State Department advisor to the Department of Defense, working with the Air Force and the Army. Mr. Churello previously served as Senior Special Counsel to the House Committee on the Judiciary. He was also an attorney at the Federal Trade Commission for over 15 years and has years of experience in the private sector. Mr. Stewart currently serves as a member of the West Virginia State Senate. He was previously the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of West Virginia during the first Trump administration and was confirmed by the Senate in 2017. Mr. Tyer previously served as a senior policy advisor to Speaker Johnson. Mr. Tyer also previously served as Republican Chief Tax Counsel for the House Committee on Ways and Means and began his career in the private sector. Before you all give your opening statements, I have 4 obligatory questions that we ask all nominees before the Senate Finance Committee. You can just give me a brief yes or no answer to these questions, and we'll start on this side and just go down the row each time. First, is there anything that you are aware of in your background that might present a conflict of interest with the duties of the office to which you have been nominated?
No.
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 No. Second, do you know of any reason, personal or otherwise, that would in any way prevent you from fully and honorably discharging the responsibilities of the office to which you've been nominated?
I do not.
No.
No.
No. Third, do you agree without reservation to respond to any reasonable summons to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of Congress if you are confirmed?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And finally, do you commit to providing a prompt response in writing to any question addressed to you by any senator from this committee?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you. And with that, we will begin in the same order with Mr. Schwitzer and move down the line. You may give your opening statements.
Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Wyden, members of this committee, I'm honored to appear before you here today as President Trump's nominee for Deputy United States Trade Representative for Asia, Textiles, Investment, Services, and Intellectual Property. I'm grateful to President Trump and Ambassador Greer for their trust and confidence. I appreciate the time that members and staff of this committee have spent with me. I look forward to working with you if I'm confirmed. I also want to express my appreciation for my family, some of whom are present today. I'm grateful to my mother and father and my 3 siblings. I'm particularly thankful for the support of my wife, Sandy, and our 3 children, Ethan, Charlie, and Finnegan. I've spent more than 2 decades in public service advancing U.S. strategic interests at the intersection of diplomacy, trade, technology, and national security. If confirmed, I look forward to continuing that mission in service of the President, in partnership with Congress, and on behalf of the American people. The United States and our allies largely built the international trading system. While we have benefited from this system, it, like all systems of governance from time to time, are in need of reform. The status quo trading system of the past 2 decades ignored the unfair trading practices of many of our largest trading partners, and as a result, many Americans, particularly in the middle class, are hurting. We need trade policies and practices that place the American economy, the American worker first, requiring that all our trade partners play by rules based upon reciprocity. Throughout my 20 years of government service, I've worked to promote the economic interests of the United States around the globe. I've served in senior positions at the Department of State, including on the Secretary of State's policy planning staff, as a senior advisor to the Department of Defense. I've also had the honor of developing and teaching graduate courses on China's economy and innovation system at the National Intelligence University. In every role, I've seen how trade policy, technological leadership, and national security are deeply intertwined. As our global competitors seek to rewrite the rules of commerce, we must ensure that our trade agenda supports not just economic growth, but also the values, resilience, and strategic strength of the United States, by ensuring that American workers, farmers, and businesses can compete fairly in global markets. Having spent much of my career negotiating international agreements and defending our companies from forced technology transfers and other discriminatory practices, I believe that trade policies must ensure that America's producers, not just our consumers, benefit from global commerce. That means securing reciprocal access, raising labor and environmental standards, and confronting coercive practices head-on. Additionally, we must strive to enhance our economic and supply chain resilience. The past few years have exposed vulnerabilities in our global supply chains, particularly in strategic sectors like semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, and critical minerals. In today's geopolitical climate, we must treat economic resilience as a core pillar of national security. USTR has a role to play in advancing trade agreements and partnerships that strengthen our ability to withstand shocks and reduce over-reliance on adversarial economies. I believe that U.S. trade leadership should be principled, pragmatic, and strategic. In my experience across the executive branch and overseas, successful policy depends on deep interagency coordination, close consultation with Congress, and sustained engagement with allies and partners. Trade is not an end unto itself, however. It is a tool to advance our broader goals: economic prosperity for all Americans, industrial strength, technological leadership, and global stability. I'm committed to working with this committee to ensure that our trade agenda reflects those priorities and delivers tangible results for the American people. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here. I look forward to your questions and the important work ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schwitzer. Mr. Churello.
Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Wyden, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify here today. I would first like to introduce my wife, Jill Churello, who is joining me today. Jill and I have been married for 31 years and have 4 children, our daughter Frances and our sons Gus IV, Peter, and Dominic. Dominic is here, but Frances, Gus, and Peter are all working in their respective jobs and supporting me from afar. I also want to acknowledge my parents, Linda and Gus Schwitzer, who are watching from their home in Florida, as well as my in-laws, Donna and Paul Verostek, who are doing the same, and several friends, colleagues, and extended family who are all supporting me. I am thrilled and honored and thank President Trump for nominating me to serve as the Assistant Secretary for Financial Resources at the Department of Health and Human Services. It is a great honor and privilege to be nominated by President Trump and to be invited to serve in his administration. I'm also grateful to Secretary Kennedy for his support and encouragement, and particularly for his vision and leadership in shaping HHS in a way to restore integrity and confidence in our government health programs and to inspire Americans to live healthy lives. Secretary Kennedy has long been a champion for the well-being of all Americans, and it is a great honor to be able to serve in his team to make America healthy again. For some background, I grew up in Cooperstown, New York, moved to Washington, D.C. for college, graduate in law school, and became an antitrust and competition policy lawyer. Jill and I met here just after college. We married and settled in Alexandria, Virginia, where we raised our family. And after law school, I worked in private practice and later for many years at the Federal Trade Commission in antitrust enforcement and competition policy. I later worked with Chairman Jim Jordan with the House Committee on the Judiciary. We need to address healthcare spending. For decades, our healthcare costs have been rising, hospital and facility consolidation increasing, new product approvals have become more costly, and despite best efforts on legislation, the financial burdens of healthcare have grown to a point of crisis. The hardest hit have been rural communities and vulnerable populations in urban and suburban areas. Throughout the last 4 years of the Biden administration, the department's budget increased by nearly 40% and its staffing increased by 17%. HHS spent $1.7 trillion in fiscal year 2024, the highest among federal agencies in total spending. Meanwhile, cancer rates in young people are growing. Mental health needs for all age groups continue to rise. Diabetes rates for Americans have reached new highs, and increasingly more and more Americans are affected by chronic illness. In short, the money being spent has not resulted in overall improvements in the health quality of Americans. Clearly, what government had been doing did not work. That said, I think now is frankly one of the most exciting times for America, particularly because we are on the cusp of a revolution in the way we approach health care. The HHS budget accounts for more than 25% of federal spending. My role, should I be confirmed, will be to provide advice and guidance to the Secretary on all aspects of the budget: financial management, grants and acquisition management, and to provide for the direction and implementation of all these activities across the department. I learned at the FTC that good policy comes from asking good questions, and I look forward to capitalizing on that experience and my background to bring healthcare spending under control, to generate greater access to care and important medicines, to revitalizing the science behind our healthcare, and thereby spur the mission to promote a healthier America. Bringing my background as an antitrust lawyer to HHS, if confirmed, I plan to lead the division by digging into the details and data and making recommendations so that taxpayer dollars are being used efficiently and producing maximum outcomes, so that HHS can better identify the best ways to address waste, fraud, and abuse, and so that we can better direct those resources to improve health care in America. No doubt, the work we will do will be arduous, but taking this proactive approach and applying my background, it will be well worth it to unlock the awesome potential of our healthy prosperity. This is truly a great time to be an American, to be part of President Trump's efforts to reshape government, and it is a great opportunity to be part of Secretary Kennedy's MAHA agenda. I'm grateful for the honor, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Churello. Mr. Stewart.
Great, thank you very much. Chair. Note this. Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Wyden, members of the Senate Finance Committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today and for considering my nomination to be the General Counsel of the Department of Health and Human Services. I want to begin by thanking President Trump for his confidence in me and for nominating me to this important role to support his vision for America. I want to thank Secretary Kennedy for his support and confidence and his leadership to make America healthy again. I also want to thank all the men and women of HHS who work hard each day in capacities that touch nearly every aspect of American life. Finally, I wouldn't be here today as a nominee without the strength and encouragement of my family. Family in many ways defines me. I want to thank my wife, Katrina, who's here today and who had no idea what this journey called life would be nearly 3 decades ago. We're blessed to have 2 amazing daughters, Bella, a student at Marshall University's School of Medicine, who's here with me today, and Audrey, a capital analyst with RBC in New York City, who's not able to be with us today. She's working, but who's watching this hearing right now. At least that's what she tells me. My nomination and the opportunity to be here today as a nominee is a testament to the opportunity of America. If you were to have told me as a young boy that one day I would be sitting here testifying before members of the United States Senate in consideration of a position in a president's administration, well, I would have told you impossible. Nothing, however, is impossible in America. I'm the proud son and grandson of West Virginia coal miners, and I was blessed with great parents. My dad would go to work in the dark, come home in the dark, and he worked more than 50 years in the coal mining industry. My mom went to vocational school, became an LPN, and worked nearly 40 years as a nurse. My grandfather served in the military. One fought on the beaches of Normandy, and both spent decades as coal miners. After being nominated by President Trump in 2017, I had the distinct honor of being confirmed and served as the United States Attorney for the Southern District of West Virginia. While I may have left the role of United States Attorney, my experiences in that role will never leave me. Our work was significant. For the first time in West Virginia history, my office prosecuted members of the West Virginia State Supreme Court, established a landmark settlement for children with disabilities, and our focus on healthcare fraud resulted in the largest Medicaid fraud prosecution in the history of West Virginia. I worked on the front lines of the opiate scourge. During my term, we took enough fentanyl off the streets to kill more than 40 million people in a state of only 1.75 million. Still today, I carry a wallet in my pocket filled with the beautiful faces of the victims of the opiate epidemic while I was U.S. Attorney. These are the pictures that truly haunt me in the silence of the dark of night. Young people like Joel Archer and Victoria Douglas. I've gotten to know too many of the moms and dads at the point of their darkest, gravest grief. Moms like Stacey Archer and Melody Douglas. As a state senator, I represent one of the districts hit hardest by the opiate crisis, but also technological revolution, changes to the American industrial economy, and a population exodus. In the Senate, I've led efforts on child welfare, foster care reform, substance abuse, and the opiate crisis. My experience as a state senator gives me a true appreciation of the role of elected bodies like Congress for the establishment of public policy, constituent representation, and oversight priorities. Given my background, I have a unique perspective and appreciation for the importance and role of rural health care. I care deeply about issues like Medicaid and SNAP because the recipients are my friends, neighbors, and constituents, are the people I attend church with on Sunday. I know the importance of the effective delivery of services. I also understand the impact of fraud and its harm to those who most need support. As General Counsel for HHS, I'll place a priority on developing an effective team with a focus on continual improvement and training. I'll build multidisciplinary teams to address critical issues. I'll place a heavy priority on identifying and eliminating fraud. Finally, I'll work earnestly to build a spirit in collaboration with members of Congress. All of this we'll do with a sense of urgency. I want you to have confidence in me and the department. As General Counsel for the Department of Health and Human Services, I'll bring the totality of my experiences, personal and professional, to the role to help President Trump and Secretary Kennedy do the work of the American people. If I were to define in a word how I feel today, well, it'd be the word grateful. I'm grateful for this opportunity for the countless generations of American heroes upon whose shoulders I stand today. People like my mom and dad, my grandparents, my family. To all of you, thank you for the opportunity to be here today and for your consideration of my nomination. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tyer.
Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Wyden, members of the Senate Finance Committee, it is a privilege to have my nomination considered by you all today. Thank you for the time that you and your staff have taken to meet with me. I know there are many demands on your time. I'm grateful for the trust that Secretary Bessent has offered me in my current role as counselor. It is an honor to be nominated Deputy Undersecretary of the Treasury by President Trump and to have the continued confidence of the Secretary. I want to thank my team at home, Rebecca, Hannah, Jack, and Meredith, as well as my parents, Scott and Teresa Tyer, father-in-law Creed Rowan, and late mother-in-law Ellen. They have been my biggest champions. I take very seriously the responsibilities that attend the positions that I've held in public service. I truly love this great nation, and I'm honored by these opportunities to serve and help improve the lives of our fellow Americans. I've been fortunate to work for a remarkable series of principals while in government: Senator and now Chairman Bill Cassidy, Chairman Kevin Brady, Chairman Jason Smith, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, and now Secretary Bessent and Deputy Secretary Falkender. It's inspiring to see the sacrifice, skill, and dedication these individuals bring to their consequential leadership roles. Having previously served as a senior tax counsel to a member of the Finance Committee, there is a feeling of home in this hearing room. I recognize the scope and significance of the issues deliberated herein, including tax, trade, health, Social Security, and family assistance. I have great respect for the members of this committee and for the commitment to public service displayed by all those serving in Congress. I count as friends and colleagues the outstanding Finance Committee staff on both sides of the aisle. I've been privileged to work with them on matters that impact the success, well-being, and prosperity of workers and families across the country. Of note, the Secure 2.0 Act of 2022, which culminated more than 2 years of bipartisan bicameral effort to strengthen our retirement savings system. I was also pleased to see the One Big Beautiful Bill signed into law by President Trump on July 4th, locking in critical tax benefits for families and small businesses and priming our economy for growth. If confirmed as Deputy Undersecretary of the Treasury, I look forward to continuing to partner with you on the important work undertaken by this committee. As former committee staff, I fully understand your responsibilities for legislating and conducting oversight. To assist those efforts, the Treasury Office of Legislative Affairs will be open and responsive on relevant matters across our departmental offices and bureaus. Working together, I'm confident we can find ways to strengthen the economy and build greater security for American families. Thank you for considering my nomination, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tyer, and I'll start with you. It's great to see you here in this room again, and I'm glad to see you on the other side of the table. We look forward to your service with Secretary Bessent. I don't really have a question for you, it's really a comment, and that is I know from working with you in the past how committed you are to the agenda that we are seeking to implement in the Trump administration, and that in particular Secretary Bessent is pursuing. And I just wanted to let you know I look forward to this continued opportunity to work with you.
Thank you, Chairman Crapo. I look forward to working with you and all the members of the committee.
Thank you. And Mr. Schwitzer, I'll come back over to you. Intellectual property protection is a critical issue. the U.S. Trade Representative plays a key role in protecting those rights around the world. For example, USTR prepares the annual Special 301 report, which identifies a wide range of concerns that limit American innovation and investment. If confirmed, how are you going to use the tools at your disposal to address the challenges identified in the Special 301 report to ensure that rigorous enforcement of American intellectual property rights exists for and fosters that innovation?
Thank you very much, Chairman Crapo, for that very important question. Intellectual property rights are a priority of of Ambassador Greer, of President Trump. It's been discussed several times. Every one of our trade agreements, it's first and foremost in our discussions. Issues like digital service taxes and others are issues that we're very concerned about. We intend to use every tool at our disposal, whether it be 301 or other tools at our disposal, working with commerce and with other elements of the U.S. government in order to ensure that U.S. intellectual property rights are protected, that U.S. property rights holders are protected. That would include things like trademarks and other items where you have counterfeit goods from certain countries, and you also have where U.S. intellectual property is stolen outright, or where countries have pressured the U.S. firms to provide access to their intellectual property. And we intend to use every tool at our disposal. I lived in China. I worked in China. I've worked on these issues literally most of my adult life. I've worked with tech companies, helping them understand how to protect their intellectual property rights in places like China. In many cases, that included developing strategies where they didn't actually import their technology into China, but they sold it through third parties. Also, I've worked with companies who actually had their intellectual property stolen. And one of the real issue sets we faced in this regard, particularly when it comes to China, Chairman, is that when the firms come to us and tell us the things that happen to them, they often tell us not to do anything about it. And this administration has decided that we're going to take on those coercive practices head on. We're not going to choose to prosecute one case or not prosecute one case on behalf of a specific firm. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the totality of the trade actions and intellectual property theft that takes place in any given country, and we're going to take a series of trade actions against the entire country, as opposed to sort of one-off attempts that have been attempted in previous administrations. And in my 20-plus years working in the government, particularly 3 times living and working in China, in almost every case, that one-off approach did not work. So we're using a systemic approach that uses every tool at our disposal to approach this from the ground up.
Well, thank you very much. And Mr. Stewart, you've learned firsthand that when a person steps forward to serve, that the political world we live in goes on the attack, and personal attacks are the weapon of the day. I'd like to give you an opportunity to respond to accusations that you have a conflict of interest with respect to your campaigns for the West Virginia State Senate and for Attorney General, respectively. And these are just brief, quick questions. In your campaigns for the State Senate and Attorney General in 2022 and 2024, did you fully comply with the West Virginia campaign finance law?
Thank you very much for the question, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to answer this. Yes, I did, and I've always done everything I can to comply with the law. When a question was raised by a member of the staff with respect to this subject, I think about a week ago, within 24 hours, I believe, give or take an hour, I made sure, because I take great pride in my background in terms of my ethics and the way I've complied with the law, I provided every single finance report from my Senate campaigns and from my campaign for Attorney General in the state of West Virginia to the Office of Government Ethics. It's important to me. I take great pride in this record. Over 30 years, almost 30 years as a professional, there's never been a whiff of controversy in terms of my character, my conduct, or my ethics. So I thank you very much for that question.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to be sure we got that on the record, and I appreciate it. My time's expired, so Mr. Schwitzer, you got away without my question. We'll see what we could do moving forward. Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stewart, let me start with you. As you sensed from our visit that I'm concerned about some of what you've been involved in West Virginia on the healthcare front. And so I'm going to get into a couple of the issues that you would have to deal with if confirmed. And I want to start with the Trump administration's record on the EMTALA law. For those that may not know the details of it, this is the law that requires hospitals to provide emergency stabilizing treatment for all patients that show up at their door. After the Dobbs case, the Biden administration provided clarity that hospitals must provide stabilizing reproductive health care in all states. So the Trump administration, one of the first things they wanted to do was to get rid of that guidance. And women have been suffering, even dying, and there's even more chaos and confusion. And at the heart of the problem is under the Trump approach, doctors play lawyers, lawyers play doctors, women are suffering, and they tell us, we had one witness, they're in the emergency room and people are arguing about what to do. Women suffering, even dying under these Trump rules. So my first question to you is, do you believe that EMTALA, this federal law that I just described, requires women to become septic or at risk of death to receive emergency reproductive medical care?
Well, I appreciate the question, Senator. And first, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be able to meet with you yesterday. And I look forward to many opportunities in the future, if confirmed, to be able to work with you and your staff on important issues like this. You know, I've taken a look at the law with respect to...
My time is short. My question is, do you believe that the law requires women to become septic to get reproductive emergency medical care?
Well, thank you for the question. The answer to that question is nothing in the law prevents emergency treatment for pregnant women. Nothing in the law today prevents that.
Well, what would you do? Let's do it this way because you're ducking the question. But what would you do to make sure that hospitals comply with this law that I just read to you? You get this job. What would you do to make sure that hospitals comply with the law that I just read you?
Well, I encourage everyone to follow the law. That's been my career. And as general counsel,
That's
if
not
confirmed...
the question. You'd be walking into a situation where in hospitals, there's so much chaos and so much confusion. Women get hurt. And it's because, as we've heard testimony, the doctors play lawyers, the lawyers play doctors, they go back and forth. We need somebody who's going to step in and make sure that women are protected in line with the law. And I've asked you 2 questions already, and I'd really like to know, if you get confirmed, what are you going to do to step in and deal with this confusion and chaos about the law that's hurting women?
Well, my answer is that I'm a lawyer, not a doctor, but I will provide guidance with respect to the law. I believe the law is clear. Nothing in the law today prevents pregnant women from getting life-sustaining emergent treatment when they're at a hospital.
I'm going to move on because you basically ducked 3 questions on this topic. If you'd like to send us something in writing that would describe how you would actually make sure that hospitals are following the law, not encouraging and all the rest, but actually following it, I'd like to see it. One question for you, Mr. Schwitzer. You know, we're having all kinds of problems with the small business people. My state is overwhelmingly a small business state. After you're done with a couple of big companies, everybody's a small business operator. It's the tariffs that are killing them. The tariffs are hitting them like a wrecking ball. If you're confirmed, what would you do? And I'd like a specific idea to help these small businesses because they're getting hit by taxes. That's what tariffs are. What would you do?
Thank you, Senator Wyden, for that question. You know, what I would do is what the president is trying to do right now and has been doing with a lot of the great trade deals and what Ambassador Greer has been doing, traveling all over the world, is that I would push for access. The U.S. small businesses have been denied access to most markets around the world. The tariff barriers, the non-tariff barriers, the regulatory strictures, the use of sort of white lists of products that are available to be purchased. Again, my experience in China is deep, Senator, and I can tell you that small businesses from the United States trying to sell in China, whether they have a superior product, whether they can beat on price, whether they have a huge market, none of those things matter, Senator. The government puts in place restrictions.
So what would you do for the small business person?
Well, opening access, Senator, is the most important thing.
How would you do that?
But we're in the middle of
They're faced with
opening.
taxes. That's what a tariff is. A tariff is a tax. They want tax relief. What would you do to give it to them?
Yeah, as I said, Senator, we're working diligently. The president has been.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Grassley.
Yeah. My first two questions, and maybe it'll eat up all my time, is directed towards Mr. Tyer. The one big beautiful bill was an historic achievement. We averted the largest tax increase in history. It made a pro-growth business provisions permanent. It unlocked business investment that will create jobs. The bill also provides additional middle-class tax relief. So now getting to Treasury writing regulations and making decisions, as Treasury works to implement the bill, the agency must work with members to ensure the provisions are implemented according to the statute and faithful to congressional intent. So the first question is a very general one. Can we count on you to keep Congress well informed during the implementation process and consult with relative members of Congress where questions arise as to what was congressional intent?
Yes, sir, Senator Grassley. Absolutely. I want to recognize that you have long been a leader on tax on this committee. I remember now fondly the many late nights and hard work that we had in 2017 working through that bill. I know you've done the same here, and Treasury will implement the law. And I look forward to working with you and your team as we go through that process.
There are several provisions that I'm particularly interested in and seeing faithfully implemented. This includes the structure of the phase out for wind and solar credits and modification of the clean fuels production credit. And remember, you're talking to the father of the wind energy tax credit. I worked with my colleagues to provide wind and solar an appropriate glide path for the orderly phase out of the tax credits. Ultimately, Congress enshrined in statute a 12-month transition period based on when projects, quote unquote, begin construction. What it means for a project to, quote unquote, begin construction has been very well established by Treasury guidance for more than a decade. Moreover, Congress specifically references current Treasury guidelines to set that term's meaning into law. It seems to me this is a case where both the law and congressional intent are very, very clear. So, Mr. Tyer, will you commit to advising the department that both the law and the congressional intent are clear, and at the beginning of construction, those official words, means what it has meant for more than a decade?
Thanks, Senator Grassley. Again, you, on behalf of your constituents, have been a leader for
Is your
decades
microphone
now.
on?
Yes, sir.
Well, then get closer to it.
Will do. Again, Senator, you've been a leader for many decades on these tax policies. It's tough to imagine a better representative of constituent interest than you. And this is an issue that falls squarely in the purview of the Office of Tax Policy at Treasury. We had an opportunity to meet with your staff this week. I understand there was interaction directly with you as well, and I think if confirmed, you can expect that type of engagement to continue, an open door through the Office of Legislative Affairs as the Office of Tax Policy works through these questions.
Okay. Now to biofuels. The reconciliation bill includes an extension and modification of clean fuel production tax credit 45Z. Implementing this credit properly and quickly is important for the biofuels industry and its participants, especially farmers. The Biden administration failed to meaningfully address 45Z regulation, which has caused major market disruption, including plant closures. When can we expect to see guidance formally on implementing the clean fuel credit so that the biofuels industry can confidently move forward with operations?
Thank you, Senator. This, again, is an issue that falls squarely within the Office of Tax Policy. I don't have the timeline on when they might provide guidance there, but this input is helpful. It's noted, and we'll be sure it is conveyed as a priority to my colleagues.
Can you expand my point of view to everybody involved in it?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Mr. Schwitzer, this will have to be quick. Do you think you will be handling the areas of international trade, and I'm interested in China. Based on your personal history, you know how challenging this will be. Do you think that the whole United States economy needs to decouple completely from China, or only certain sectors of our economy?
Thank you for that important question, Senator. As Secretary Besson has said, the President has said, Ambassador Greer has said, we don't seek to decouple from China. What we seek is trade reciprocity, and we seek trade de-risking. There are certain segments of the U.S. economy that require de-risking. Semiconductors is a really important one, obviously. Autonomous vehicles, the Internet of Things, for instance, where you have cyber physical systems that can turn on and turn off elements of our critical digital infrastructure, aerospace, defense, other areas of national infrastructure. These are the things that we need to de-risk. But when it comes to the other areas, we want to sell into China. As long as there's trade reciprocity, we should be able to buy from China items that they produce that others can't produce, or whether it be certain types of textiles and others where there's a robust market. So what we really seek is purely fairness, reciprocity, and of course we do need some strategic de-risking, as Secretary Besson said recently, as the President said before.
Time of the gentleman's expired. Thank you, Senator Grassley. Senator Whitehouse is next.
Thanks very much. Mr. Schwitzer, welcome. Dan Sullivan, Senator from Alaska, and I have been working together on ocean plastic waste problems. One of our bills attracted the President's attention, and we went up to the Trump Oval Office for a bill signing, and he was excited enough about it that he called in the press, not just a bill signing, and did a long riff about how important it is to our coasts that all of the ocean plastic waste that's being dumped very often through Asian rivers into the ocean, and then it winds up on our shores, that was a problem that we should be solving. Obviously, Dan and I both agree that is a problem that we should be solving. One very useful solution to that would be to put a trade penalty or consequence of some kind on these Asian countries that don't invest adequately in their own waste management systems, which would seem also to be good for American companies that provide waste management equipment and advice and support. So I would ask you to consider that as you're looking at trade policy with Asia. At the moment, they're getting away free. There are no consequences for them from that. It's not even counted in our list of trade concerns, and yet it was enough to aggravate President Trump in this meeting. Would you comment on that?
Thank you, Senator, and I appreciated the time that we spent together during this process, and your comments, I think, are well taken, and I agree completely. I have a very long history of actually working on these very specific issues. I was the Environment, Science, Technology, and Health Minister Counselor in Embassy Beijing from 2015 to 2018. I have visited the settling ponds, for instance, in Inner Mongolia, where they process rare earths. One of the ways that they are able to flood markets with products that are below market value or below the cost of production is because they do not internalize the environmental costs. It's an unrecognized subsidy, in my opinion, and it is a priority of the USTR to begin to implement better environmental safeguards within our trade agreements, the U.S., China, Mexico trade agreement. Yes.
Let me jump to that then, because that's a perfect segue to my second point, which is that with respect to carbon pollution, we are at a disadvantage with respect to China, which has become the world's greatest polluter. It gives financial advantage to Chinese firms that don't have to invest in appropriate environmental safeguards and protections and scrubbers and so forth, versus us. So I gather you would agree that we suffer both an economic and an environmental harm when we allow offshoring based on the fake advantages of one country not meeting up to its environmental responsibilities the way that we do.
Yes, I would agree, Senator. Again, that's why, you know, the USMCA had environmental safeguards built into the trade agreement. Ambassador Greer said many times, we want to build these similar sort of high-quality environmental safeguards into other trade agreements as we continue to move forward with our discussions about providing more reciprocal trade, environment, labor standards. These are other aspects of reciprocity that we intend to try to build into these
Senator Cassidy and Senator Graham have a bill on the Republican side. I've got a matching bill on the Democrat side. We're in conversation constantly about trying to reconcile the two, and we've asked the trade representative, Jamison Greer, to participate in those discussions, and he's promised that he will once this flurry of tariff activity that must have you pretty overburdened over there is through. So I look forward to making good on that pledge. The last thing that I will mention, since we have HHS here, I know, Mr. Stewart, it's not really going to be your problem. You're a general counsel, but I cannot let anybody from HHS come through without once again pointing out how damned infuriating it is to me that hospitals in Connecticut, our neighboring state, I'm from Rhode Island in case you didn't know, and Massachusetts, the other neighboring state, get paid about 20% more than my hospitals. If a president is visiting Martha's Vineyard and gets hurt, they fly over St. Anne's Hospital in Fall River to the better, higher quality emergency department of Rhode Island Hospital. But if they'd stopped in Fall River, they'd get paid 20 cents on the dollar more. That is indefensible. HHS has never defended it. The organization is just too damned lazy and disinterested to fix this problem, but is very, very, very real in my home state. So it probably isn't general counsel business, but you're here from HHS, and you're going to hear this from me every chance I get to make this case. There is no defense for this discrepancy. We are one regional healthcare market, and we are getting clobbered as a result of a completely unfair payment discrepancy that your organization doesn't even bother to defend. It just maintains it. So excuse my rant, but I hope you can understand how very irritating and unfair this is.
Well, I want to thank you for the opportunity to meet with you and to talk about those issues. And I can guarantee it 100%. I'll be available to you to talk about that issue, other issues, whenever you want to talk about those things. And I'll take them very seriously.
Appreciate it. Look forward to that conversation. As you know, we talked about the end-of-life program in Rhode Island as well and hope to follow up with that, but my time has expired. I thank the ranking member for his courtesy.
I thank my colleague. Senator Langford is next.
Thank you. In a moment of earth-shattering bipartisanship, I want to be able to second what Senator Whitehouse was saying, because we experienced the same thing in Oklahoma with a disproportionate payment system for surgeons, physicians, whatever it may be in Oklahoma based on other states around us on this. And that might have made sense 40 years ago. It doesn't make sense today on it. So that'll be one of the things I look forward to that conversation to be able to figure out on that one. Mr. Stewart, let me continue on with you. You're going to have questions. All of you will have questions that will come up from some of my friends that are here on the dais saying, are you going to follow the law when President Trump asks you to do something? So, Mr. Stewart in particular, since you're the counsel on this, I want to ask you some questions based on what President Biden did when he ignored the law repetitively, and it had a direct effect on my state and on the people in my state. Let me give you some examples. Title 10 funding is out there, does AIDS testing in rural areas, breast cancer screenings in rural areas all over the country. President Biden's HHS team invented a new standard to say if each state does not promote, not provide, but does not promote abortion in their state, they won't get Title 10 funds. He followed up with it in my state and cut off funding for AIDS testing, for breast cancer screenings, for all kinds of screenings in my state of Oklahoma, because my state wouldn't bend to his will and promote abortion in the state. They literally wanted us to be able to put a 1-800 number on all the health materials that went out from our health department saying, here's the number you can call to go get an abortion. When we said no, they said no AIDS testing funding for you. There's nothing in the law that says that. They just created that out of thin air. That had a direct effect on the health care in my state. The conscience protection issue is very clear in law, that if a nurse or a physician says to their hospital, hey, I don't want to be a part of an abortion, I don't want to be a part of sex change operations, that violates my conscience, the federal government is to be able to step in and make sure that conscience protection is actually protected. The Biden administration literally told everyone through HHS at the very beginning, we're no longer going to protect people in conscience protections, and then actually create a rule they sent out to hospitals to say, if you're a physician and you don't perform sex change operations, we're going to come down to you, literally violating the law on its face. ORR tried to be able to find new ways to be able to shuttle people to abortion, saying we didn't pay for the abortion, we just drove them there, provided staffing, provided the details. I can go on and on and on with the Biden administration, the way they ignored the law. So my simple question to you is, are you going to work to make sure that this administration follows the law that the Biden administration ignored?
So, Senator, I appreciate that question a great deal. It will be a theme, I believe, in terms of will you follow the law. I have a career that proves I'll follow the law. I believe in the four corners of the law as passed by policymakers, and that the role that I will have is to interpret the law and give good advice to Secretary Kennedy and members at HHS when it comes to interpreting and applying the law. And I believe my job is not to look outside of that and create new law. I believe policymakers do a great job of that themselves.
Yeah. Well, the simple thing here is we're a nation of laws. We want everyone to be able to follow the laws. And we're grateful to be able to have that fixed when previous presidents ignored the law, to be able to say, hey, let's just get back to following the law on this. Mr. Churello, I want to ask you a little bit. You're going to have a lot of the budget issues and have a lot of big decisions to be able to make on grant making and how that process is going to go. I have noticed that a lot of the decisions for grants, if you go back and look at the grants and the grant decision makers, they're made by the same people year after year after year. And I'm always shocked that when Harvard seems to get a grant every year for the same thing, and you look at the grant decision makers, it's made of all Harvard graduates. Shocking that would happen when there are lots of other universities and lots of other entities doing great healthcare research all over the country that don't get a shot to be able to do it. So my simple question, you don't need to answer it completely today because I want to be able to poke on this and say, grant decision makers need to change. They need to have fresh eyes that'd be able to look at it. And if the same people are making decisions over and over and over again on that, it'd be helpful to be able to get some new voices. When you're doing scientific research, getting stuck in a rut doesn't help in that. So I just want to be able to raise that to you as an issue. Is that fair?
Fair, and thank you for raising the issue.
The other issue that I want to be able to raise to you is just the decision about some of the healthcare grants as they're done just in general. There's been a lot of frustration about how some of the dollars go out and how some of the awards are done. So NIH in 2022 did a $350,000 award to develop a smart toilet using AI. Not 100% sure what the AI toilet is supposed to do. There's the federal taxpayers paid for a study through HHS about wearing helmets if they prevent injuries in West Africa. Now, I would tell you for free, wearing a helmet in West Africa has the same health effects that it does wearing a helmet in the United States. It's probably a good idea, but we paid for that. There was a huge study that was done to study the effects of climate change in a specific area of North Africa and its health effects on things. I think most Americans want to say, what are we investing our dollars in? We want good NIH research. We want good research on cancer, so many different rare diseases that are out there that are dependent on us doing the basic research. My encouragement is when you're doing the grant studies and evaluating who gets it, let's make sure we're putting the priorities into the places that needs to be put. Fair?
Fair. Thank you for the question.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Langford. Senator Hassan.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chairman, and to you and the ranking member for this hearing. Good morning to our nominees, and congratulations on your nominations to you and your families, because I know this is a full family effort. I'm going to start with a question, and with respect to my colleague from Oklahoma, I want to be very clear. I ask all nominees this question: if directed by the president to take an action that would break the law, would you follow the law or follow the president's directive? And I'm not talking about regulatory interpretation that courts decide. That's part of our democracy. I'm talking about a president whose OMB director sat in front of me in a committee hearing and said he did not believe that he or the president had to follow the Impoundment Control Act of 1974, even though the Supreme Court of the United States ruled that it is constitutional. So right down the line, if you're directed to take an action by the president that would break the law, are you going to follow the law or the president's directive, Mr. Schwitzer?
I will follow the law.
Mr. Churello.
I don't think I'd be asked to do that, but I'm an attorney and I follow the law.
I was in Trump 45, honored to serve in that role. I was never asked to violate the law, and I believe if President Trump were here right now, he'd say, Mike Stewart, follow the law.
Well, good, because he pardoned a bunch of people who attacked police officers and were convicted by a jury of ordinary Americans. Mr. Tyer.
Senator Hassan, I don't expect I would ever be asked that, but irrespective of the actions of others, I will follow the law.
Thank you. Mr. Stewart, we share a commitment to ending the scourge of the fentanyl epidemic. I represent New Hampshire, and as you know, our 1.4 million people have been devastated by the fentanyl epidemic, just as the people of West Virginia have. Addiction medicine doctors across the country agree that methadone is one of the most effective medications to treat people with opioid use disorder. In his testimony before Congress, Secretary Kennedy said that medication-assisted treatment is a critical tool for preventing overdose deaths. This is one area where Secretary Kennedy and I agree. As a state senator, you introduced a bill that would have outlawed methadone clinics in your state, which would have effectively ended the use of methadone to treat opioid addiction in West Virginia. I understand that there are bad actors in the methadone clinic space, to be sure, but do you think Secretary Kennedy is wrong to support medication-assisted treatment like methadone?
So I thank you for the question very much, and it's such an important question, and it rides inside my soul, and at times of the essence, but I support and agree with Secretary Kennedy full-heartedly on the issue of medically assisted treatment. That story that you're talking about in terms of methadone, the issues of methadone, Suboxone, other treatment methodologies with respect to the opiate scourge or people who suffer with substance abuse disorder, one of the most important things they get is they need wraparound services with that.
No, I understand that. I'm just trying to get at, so you'll support efforts at the department to expand access to all types of medication-assisted treatment, including both methadone and buprenorphine?
I'm going to support Secretary Kennedy on this issue. I agree with him on it, but keep in mind there's a difference between being a policymaker in West Virginia.
I just want to understand that you agree that the gold standard here is medication-assisted treatment for fentanyl addiction in particular. Buprenorphine's important. Doctors can now prescribe it in their offices. It's really important. I agree that wraparound services are also important. I just wanted to make sure that we're clear on that. Let me move forward to Mr. Churello. If confirmed, you'd oversee the distribution of grant funding that Congress appropriates to the department. Congress appropriated $286 million for the Title X Family Planning Program this year. This funding supports preventive care visits for nearly 3 million Americans each year. As part of this care, the Title X funds cervical cancer screenings, which detect possible signs of cancer in tens of thousands of women every year. If confirmed, will you commit to distribute every dollar that Congress appropriates for the life-saving Title X program in accordance with the law?
Thank you for the question, Senator Hassan, and I appreciated the opportunity to meet with you and talk about this issue before. The Title X issues that you're talking about, and particularly cancer screening, are issues that have hit my family, and we can't emphasize the importance of getting tested and being evaluated on those things. As I told you at the beginning here, I will follow the law when it comes to appropriations and managing, and I will lean heavily on my operating divisions to guide as to what the mission-critical funding is necessary.
All right, well, I appreciate that. Right now, the administration is withholding $500,000 in Title X money from my state, even though it has been appropriated, and it is supposed to be used for these cancer screenings, so I hope we can get to work to getting that money out. Finally, Mr. Schwitzer, we need to work on a bipartisan basis to counter China's unfair and abusive trade practices. Unfortunately, the president seems to back down every time there is a chance to hold the Chinese government accountable, like just this week extending the tariff pause on China without any clear wins for the United States. Meanwhile, the administration has targeted our allies like Canada with tariffs that raise costs for families in New Hampshire and damage our economic partnerships. As Deputy U.S. Trade Representative covering Asia, would you advise administration officials to reverse tariffs that target our allies like Canada in order to focus on actually combating unfair trade from adversaries like the Chinese government?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. That's what I will say specific. I'm not in right now, so the specifics of Canada are very difficult for me to speak about. But what I can say is that the totality of the trade policy of the president is to address a global problem. We have a global national security problem that is where China is at the center in many cases, but it's not solely about China. And so what I would say is that I would recommend that we continue to focus on China with the recognition that China is the second largest economy in the world.
And let me stop you because I'm over and I appreciate the chair's indulgence here. I just got back from a bipartisan trip to Canada. Our best friends to our north, my state's biggest trading partner, are having to look elsewhere for the kind of partnerships that are going to undermine our relationship and, frankly, our joint security interests with Canada, who is a highly cooperative and constructive partner with northern border security as well as other issues. We are making a grave mistake in the way we are treating Canada, and it is going to haunt us for years if we do not change quickly. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hassan. Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. Congratulations to the nominees, and welcome to your family members. Mr. Schwitzer, I want to start with you. As Deputy U.S. Trade Representative, you would be charged with overseeing U.S. engagement and negotiation for trade in services. I'm curious if you know what is the _1 U.S. services export.
Tourism, I believe.
That's a great answer because it is. It's travel and tourism. According to the U.S. Department of Commerce, travel and tourism is the largest service export for the United States, accounting for almost 20% of American services exports and 10% of all exports in 2024. In 2024, travel and tourism contributed $2.9 trillion. I mean, $2.9 trillion to the United States economy, and it supports more than 15 million American jobs. As a deputy USTR, what would you do to ensure that President Trump's blanket trade war on our allies, like Canada, does not cause further damage to America's travel and tourism industry, including the 300,000 Nevada jobs that this industry supports?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator. Tourism is an important industry. The service industries are critically important for us. Commerce actually runs our sort of tourism promotion policy, so I recommend sort of reaching out to Commerce Department directly.
You don't have to lecture me on what Commerce does. I know what it does. And let me just say, I was just in Canada with my colleague, Senator Hassan. The impact that the tariffs have had on travel and tourism in this country is documented, it's legitimate, and that's in your bailiwick. And I need somebody that is going to be an advocate for addressing the impact that travel and tourism and the decrease in numbers and the negativity it is causing to our U.S. economy to talk about how the tariffs are impacting trade. So my question to you is, what are you going to do about it?
Senator, I can commit that I will, learn as much as I can about the specifics of tourism in your state, how we can further encourage tourism to all over the United States, to the extent that any policy is impacting that, whatever that policy might be. Are
you familiar with Brand USA?
Yes, I am.
Great. So you're familiar with the travel and tourism policies and the programs that we have set up for this country. It's not just Nevada, it's for this country. I hope you will be an advocate. I look forward to working with you and having you develop a strategy to really talk about what the impact these tariffs are having on our trade, travel, and tourism in this country. It's not just about Nevada, but we are seeing a direct impact because of it. So we need to work together. I only have so much time. Let me jump to one other issue. Mr. Schwitzer, in recent days, the administration has announced trade deals with several countries. Neither Congress nor the public has seen actually the text of most of these agreements. And what little has been issued by USTR and the White House has been honestly questioned or openly refuted by the countries we have actually claimed we've reached deals with. And so, Mr. Schwitzer, in your opinion, what is the value in a trade agreement that is not legally binding, does not come through Congress, has no written enforcement mechanism, and can be unilaterally violated at will?
Thank you for the question. I think there's a huge value in my, over 20 years experience, much of which working overseas in our embassies. My experience showed that when the president gets together, whatever president that is, with the prime minister or president of another country, and they set the policy direction, they tell not only the U.S. government, but it's the other country's government officials who now know that this is what our bosses told us we are going to achieve. Many, and again, I can only speak what I know as much as you do. I'm not actually in USTR right now. I know what's in the public domain, so you know as much as I do. These agreements will be structured as executive agreements. We have a number of executive agreements. When I worked at the Department of State, we negotiated executive agreements on science and technology, on health, on climate, all sorts of things. None of those required congressional approval. Wherever these agreements require statutorily congressional approval, we will seek congressional approval. Ambassador Greer is committed to...
Do you think it's important that there is congressional approval?
Wherever it's required, we will definitely follow the law, and we will do that.
Because they're not doing it now, but I hope you use your voice and your commitment today to follow the law to make sure that that happens. My time is up. The rest of the questions I will submit for the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Daines.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I want to thank all the nominees here and your willingness to serve for this great country. I want to speak for a moment about that big, beautiful bill, now a big, beautiful law. It's one of the most transformative pieces of legislation that I've ever had a chance to work on Capitol Hill. When you get to a bill that's nearly 1,000 pages in length, typically in Washington, D.C., after a bill like that gets passed, the more you dig into it, the worse it gets, except for this bill. This is a bill where the more we dig into it, the more the American people see what we actually passed, the better it gets. And I'm very proud of what we did here. And Chairman Crapo, again, thanks for your leadership. This was a consequential moment. I'm grateful that we got this passed and signed by the president. This strengthens the border. It preserves Medicaid by rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. We've got to combat the lies from the left about what we did here to make sure that Medicaid is there for the future by going after the abuse and the fraud that exists today in that program. We protected the Second Amendment. We funded our military. This will unleash the American economy, making these provisions permanent on expensing capital, R&D, interest. This is just jet fuel for our economy and how we beat China long-term by incentivizing investment in R&D and innovation. By the way, we prevented a $4.5 trillion tax increase, the largest that would have occurred in American history. That was stopped with what we did. The average Montana family is going to save about $3,000 a year because of what we did. So we need to keep talking about that. Senior citizens, about 90% of senior citizens will see their Social Security benefits not taxed as a result of this bill. The no tax on tips, that brilliant thought that President Trump received during the campaign, what a way to help reward those hardworking men and women across America who service us every day. He, the president, delivered on his promise to unleash American energy dominance. We saved a couple of coal mines in Montana because of what was done with that bill, and our energy sector will continue to boom in Montana and across the country. The administration understands the need for baseload power, grid reliability. Again, all provisions in this bill that are going to help our country. The previous administration tried to shut down the Colstrip power plant. That's in my state of Montana. It's a major baseload power provider. They put up burdensome red tape. This administration, the Trump administration, is overturning those harmful rules that allow us to power our economy. Anyway, let me move to some questions here. I'm going to start with Mr. Tyer. Will you commit to safeguarding these projects that we just passed, that are complying with and making sure they're complying with the law as written and the existing beginning of construction guidance?
So, Senator Daines, just to begin, want to recognize your leadership on small business provisions in this bill, as well as cost recovery, as you said, will be a significant accelerant for businesses. The Office of Tax Policy will interpret and provide guidance, and look forward to working with you and your staff as they go through that process.
Thank you. I just want to have assurances that any revisions to existing guidance will hold harmless projects to comply with the rules in effect prior to changes made in the bill. As you know, I've been a strong supporter of CDFIs in the past. I was thankful to hear Secretary Bessent reiterate in March that the administration also recognizes, and I quote, the important role that the CDFI fund and CDFIs play in expanding access to capital and in providing technical assistance to communities across the United States. I appreciated Secretary Bessent's affirming the administration's recognition of the statutory functions of the CDFI fund and the programs it administers, in his memo to the OMB confirming these programs in the fund were required by law. However, we have heard from recent stakeholders who are concerned with the administration's commitment to administering these vital CDFI fund programs in light of funding delays. Mr. Tyer, given the Secretary's earlier statement and memo to OMB, can you provide assurances the Department of Treasury will commit to allocating the remaining 2025 FY25 funds already appropriated by Congress for the CDFI fund?
Thank you, Senator. It's not a matter within my current responsibilities, but I hear the concern. If confirmed, look forward to working with you and your team.
All right, thank you. A lot of ground to cover in a short period of time. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Daines. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Congress is deeply worried about the opioid crisis and mental health issues. So last year, we allocated more than $7 billion for the prevention and treatment of these conditions. Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. heads the Department of Health and Human Services, which is charged by law with administering that funding through the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA. Mr. Stewart, if confirmed, you will be the top lawyer at HHS advising Secretary Kennedy. So let's do a little law so that we can understand what kind of advice you would give to the Secretary. 42 U.S.C. 300X-55 says, HHS shall terminate SAMHSA grants only if, quote, a state has materially failed to comply with the agreements or other conditions required for the receipt of the grant. That is the only condition under which Congress says these grants can be canceled. So, Mr. Stewart, let's start easy. I've read you the statutory language. Can Secretary Kennedy wake up in a bad mood one morning and simply say to the worker who is running a suicide hotline, I don't like your face, I'm canceling your state's grant money?
Well, let me first respond by saying thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to working with you in the future. I did receive your letter.
I appreciate that, but we're very limited on time. Would that be legal?
What I can tell you is that in every instance, I'll give the advice of complying with the law. No, that's not the
question I asked. I'm asking you if Secretary Kennedy wakes up in a bad mood one morning, can he say to somebody, I don't like your face, so I'm canceling your state's SAMHSA grant?
Well, what I'd like to do is review the code and all the code provisions.
I just read you the code language. Did you have any problem understanding it? A state, you can only do cancellation if a state has materially failed to comply with the agreements or other conditions required for the receipt of the grant. That's all it says.
The key words, though, are the agreements and the terms of
You
those.
think there's an agreement out there that says that the secretary can cancel a grant because I don't like your face?
No, so I think that, so I don't believe that's been the case. I don't believe that's ever happened.
I have no reason.
And
I'm
so
asking you about the legal advice you will give. And I want to understand under a statute that says these are the only conditions under which a grant can be canceled. Do you think Secretary Kennedy can say, I don't like your face, so I'm canceling your grant?
So accepting that term, I don't like your face, what I'm telling you is that the terms and conditions of those agreements matter. And so we have to review those.
I don't think any of them say, I don't like your face.
No, I agree with you on this, but I haven't heard Secretary.
Look, we're 3 minutes into this. Can I just have a, yeah, that would be illegal?
That you can't cancel a contract, to my knowledge, because you don't like somebody's
Great.
face.
Okay, let's do a second one. What if Secretary Kennedy wakes up in a bad mood and he said, I heard you're a Republican, and it turns out I really don't like Republicans, so I'm going to cancel your grant for your addiction treatment center. You think that would be legal?
Secretary, I think that there's a formula to review these things. I believe Secretary Kennedy would go to council and ask for these things.
I'm asking if the secretary wanted to do that, he wanted to cancel all the grants that are held by Republicans, would that be legal?
My advice would be to follow the rules and the laws with respect to every one of these.
You are the one who's supposed to tell him how to interpret a statute that says the only conditions are if the state is not meeting the terms of the contract.
We've got to meet the terms of the contract. If they're outside the terms of the contract, it can be canceled.
Okay, so can he cancel because you're a Republican?
If it's not included in the terms of the contract, no.
Bingo. Okay, so the answer is that would be illegal, right? How about the third one? Your work is no longer necessary. Your state's grant is canceled. Let's just say there's nothing in the contract about whether the work is necessary. Would it be illegal to cancel the grant under those conditions?
That's not as easy a question as simply saying yes or no.
Easy?
Well, listen, we've got to be able to look in terms of the intent of these contracts as well.
No, that's not what the statute says. And you are the lawyer who is giving advice to Secretary Kennedy. And so I want to know, as the person who gives advice, when you read statutory language that says there's only one condition under which you can do this, and that is if the state has materially failed to comply with the agreements or other conditions, that you can cancel the grant. And by the way, you have to give notice in a hearing for doing that. Can he wake up and say, we decided we don't need you anymore?
My advice
if that's not in the grant.
My advice will always be to follow the terms and agreements.
So in this case, you would say, you can't do that, Mr. Secretary.
I will give the advice to follow the terms of both the code and those agreements.
And if the contract doesn't say that, you will tell the secretary not to do it.
In every instance, we will follow the terms and conditions and make sure we follow the code.
Well, I really hope you do follow the terms and conditions in the agreement, because that is exactly the letter that Secretary Kennedy sent, canceling projects all over this country, and the only grounds he gave were grounds that are not in the contract and clearly in violation of the law. So I hope, Mr. Stewart, based on what you've said, you will deliver that message to Secretary Kennedy and give advice that is consistent with the law in the future. Thank you.
Well, let me just...
Thank you. And Senator Young.
Thank you, Chairman. I congratulate all of our nominees to your nominations for these important positions. I thank you for your interest in serving our country. Mr. Schwitzer, you've been nominated for an important post, Deputy U.S. Trade Representative, Investment Services, IP, with the rank of Ambassador. So I'll be directing some questions at you. For too long, American patients have unfairly burdened shouldered the cost of global pharmaceutical innovation, while foreign governments impose price controls that shift the share of R&D costs onto U.S. consumers. This isn't just a health policy issue, it's a trade issue, and it's one that President Trump has rightly prioritized. These foreign pricing practices function as non-tariff barriers that distort markets, that undervalue American innovation, and undermine U.S. exports and jobs. That's why I have welcomed the administration's directive for the administration to address these policies directly and to secure binding commitments from our trading partners to fairly value U.S. developed medicines. Trade policy must defend American innovation, not allow it to be discounted abroad. Foreign nations shouldn't be permitted to game the system at the expense of U.S. patients, workers, and future medical breakthroughs. Mr. Schwitzer, if confirmed, how do you plan to elevate the issue of discriminatory price controls, particularly in key Asian markets, and what practical steps would you take to encourage our trading partners to share this burden of pharmaceutical innovation?
Thank you very much, Senator. It's a very important question. I agree completely. As for elevating it, luckily the president has already made it a priority, so that makes it very easy for someone like me when I go in and speak to my counterparts in any country. Having the backing of the president, the public backing of the president, where he's called this out, his sort of long-standing history now at this point of being very serious about trade, countries taking the president seriously, enables me to go in and have my words taken very seriously. I agree that there are a number of trade tools that we could use as we negotiate through specifics in any given country, making sure that our firms get fair access, that they aren't discriminated against. I can tell you again, specifically in China, what they do is they have a national drug list. When a drug is available to be sold in China, it first has to go through the National Family Planning and Health Commission. They have to decide that the drug can be provided to their customers, to their consumers. When they negotiate that, however, it starts with a negotiation in their own legislation that says they want an 80% discount off of the global price in order to sell into the Chinese consumers. And they have a 3-year renegotiation where their expectation is to renegotiate another further 50% down. We need to attack those things head on. Those are discriminatory practices. Europe has its own problem sets. They can sell in here to the U.S. Our firms oftentimes end up manufacturing overseas in order to gain access to those markets. So I agree with you completely, sir. It's a priority of mine. I will bring it up at every opportunity.
It seems to me this would be a smart way to address one that brings together Republicans, Democrats, almost all stakeholders, certainly consumers around the country. I'm not yet sold on the whole most favored nation construct, but this is an area I think that is ripe for opportunity for the administration. So I thank President Trump for prioritizing it. Digital trade and infrastructure, something else. I've only got about a minute left that I'd like to briefly touch on, but this is going to be an important tool moving forward economically. The U.S. leads the way with respect to development and provision of digital services. We really need to strike more digital trade agreements. It also becomes a national security issue when you think about the ability of this ecosystem to continue to be built out around the world, interoperability, our standards built into these different systems, as opposed to the Chinese standards, which don't value openness, transparency, and interoperability. So the U.S. digital trade agenda has to go beyond data flow commitments to include standards that promote trust, transparency, security. If confirmed, Mr. Schwitzer, how would you balance the commercial opportunities of digital services trade with the national security risks posed by untrusted suppliers, particularly Chinese state-linked providers?
Thank you, Senator. I've actually written extensively on this in the past. It's something that I know a great deal about. I've worked extensively, particularly on the hardware side. I think one of the aspects that folks don't pay a lot.
It's the U.S. Senate, so if you could just summarize a lifetime of scholarship in 30 seconds or less would be helpful.
Sure, Senator. I agree completely. We need to build networks of trust. We need our partners and allies in Europe, in Latin America, in elsewhere in Asia to agree to network networks of trust, to install telecommunications, Internet of Things, cyber physical systems that can be trusted. That means in most cases those products and the core technology underneath them are American made. In most cases, we need to make sure that those are made in America wherever possible, or made in allied countries wherever possible. We need to build that into our trade and our other bilateral agreements with our partner nation states.
Couldn't agree with you more. Look forward to working with you on that priority. Chairman?
Thank you, Senator Warnock.
Thank you, Brother Chair. Great to be here. Welcome to the hearing. Much of the funding for the CDC, which I'm proud to say is based in Atlanta, flows directly to state and local health departments. But the Trump administration's massive firings at the CDC mean that many dedicated expert staff are no longer there to assist and guide state and local health officials who are trying to respond to public health threats. And many grants that were already awarded to state and local health agencies are now left in limbo. With several multi-year contracts canceled by this administration, including some contracts that were already near completion. Mr. Churello, you're nominated to be in charge of financial resources at HHS. So please tell me, how is canceling active multi-year contracts awarded by CDC, some of which were 90% completed with most of the money already out the door, an efficient use of federal funding? To me, it seems unadvised and a kind of summary dismissal of work that's already being done and an ideological waste of federal resources. Can you help me to understand why this makes sense?
Well, Senator, thank you for the question and for your interest in the topic. You're talking about our contracts that I have not had the opportunity to work in or understand the facts, as I've testified before. I'll follow the law when it comes to the allocation of funds and the management within the agency. And so,
welcome to the hearing, and congratulations to you and your family. I questioned a nominee about similar contracts a couple weeks ago or last week, and I'm hearing the nominees come up here and say, I'm going to follow the law. That's good. I support that. It's basic, but it's good. But I'm asking you a management question, if this makes sense.
So understanding the issues from my perspective requires learning about the issues and leaning into the operating divisions to understand how those decisions are made, and then evaluating the allocation of the resources.
So you haven't had a chance to take a look, is what I'm.
Well, I haven't looked at those issues.
So if confirmed, will you look into these canceled CDC contracts to see if any federal funds have been wasted due to incomplete work? And will you report your findings, whatever they are, back to this committee? Yes or no?
I absolutely commit to work with the committee on their inquiries relative to the work we do.
Yes or no? It's a simple question, sir.
Well, as I've testified, I don't know exactly the contract you're talking about, but I am going to look into the issues when should I be confirmed.
You will look into the issue and report to the committee what you found.
I will follow the law accordingly and report back to the committee.
I take that as a yes.
Well, as I said, I'll follow the customs of it.
So let me say, I would urge you to consider the important programs at CDC that help states keep their public health programs strong, particularly in a situation where the grants are almost completed. We could begin to see the impact, it seems to me, and do some analysis. To have those grants then summarily dismissed seems more ideological than anything else. If confirmed, you will be responsible for developing and advising the Secretary on the budget for HHS. Do you agree that in public health, investing dollars up front through grants and other programs can often save money down the line?
Senator Warnock, I'm an antitrust lawyer, and as such, I know that there's different economic incentives based on when money flows into different projects. And you want to be able to balance the incentives, particularly when you're spending public dollars, to both incentivize the outcomes that are intended by the allocated resources, but also to do so in such a way so as not to create an environment that festers for waste, fraud, and abuse.
I feel like I gave you a softball question. I asked, do you think investing money up front can often save money down the line?
And I think I just answered the question only in that yes, sometimes
Larry, let me give you more context. We all know that Secretary Kennedy talks a whole lot about wanting to address chronic disease, and I support that. I've seen it up close as a pastor and as a senator. But let's look at what he's done these last few months. On April 1st, Secretary Kennedy completely demolished the CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, and in the president's budget request, the center was completely zeroed out. This office ran programs at preventing Alzheimer's disease, diabetes. Let me quickly say that $1 out of 4 in our country on health care is spent on people with diabetes. It's the context for which, we see emerging disease and sickness. Heart disease, cancer. Do you think working to prevent Alzheimer's disease, prevent diabetes, when $1 out of 4 in our health system is spent on people with diabetes, does that feel like government waste to you?
Well, I answer that by saying I support Secretary Kennedy's efforts to focus on things like waste, fraud, and abuse, and also to make sure that the funds that are being allocated by Congress are getting to the people who most need them. And sometimes that involves reorganization or refocusing. And I look forward to getting into the position.
Brother Chairman, I want to thank you for giving me some extra time. And so let me just say that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And we literally see that in the work that CDC does. And I would hope that you would look at this, that you would take it seriously, because it's literally a matter of life and death. Not to mention the implications for the federal budget. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Stewart, I want to congratulate you on being the only person on the list where we don't have to have an answer key for how to pronounce names. It is Mr. Schwitzer, Mr. Churello, and Mr. Tyer. Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Schwitzer, to your nomination, and to Ethan, Charlie, and Finnegan, who I think are in the audience. You should be proud. You're going to get the first question. I intend to support all your nominations, and I probably won't have time to get to all of you. Mr. Schwitzer, I'm the chair of the Intellectual Property Subcommittee and Judiciary. I've been spending a lot of time there, and I spend a particularly significant amount of my time on the theft from China. I mean, we can legitimately say that China is an innovator, but a lot of the foundation for all that innovation is just blatant theft from U.S. intellectual property. I'll give you a good example. In fact, I've got a bill that I'd like to talk with you maybe after you get over there. It's called Fighting Tax Cheat or Trade Cheats. We got to figure out a way to get a force multiplier from private sector to go after the hundreds of incidences that we just do not have for customs. We don't have the capacity to do it. So I'd like to talk about that bill. But I want to start by the president made a comment the other day on his talk on AI that I found concerning, because he said that the intellectual property copyright infringements were just too complicated to be dealt with in the implementation of AI, and it would have to be settled by the courts. The challenge that I have with that is that would be great news for China. Now we're going to flood the zone not only with their rampant theft of IP, but maybe an administration posture says it's just too complicated to get it done on the front end, and therefore maybe we should just wait and get it done on the back end. That is not a way to keep our competitive edge. And what do you think about that? In negotiating a trade agreement with China, what advice would you give to people on the front line saying, how do we get them right and hold them accountable for most of their economic miracle being founded on the theft of U.S. innovation?
Thank you, Senator. Very important question. And I've spent literally my entire adult life living in, working on these issues on China. I speak Chinese. I have helped companies solve these problems directly. It's very complicated in some aspects, but it's less complicated than it needs to be. And I think the president has really shown the kind of leadership that's required. You have to take these problems on head on. You can't attack them one at a time, as you've discussed. And I mentioned earlier that, while at the embassy, I've seen companies who would come to us and say, they had intellectual property stolen. We would say, great, we need to make a case of this. And they would say, oh, please don't mention our name. because they knew they were stuck in a prisoner's dilemma, as I'm sure you're aware, Senator.
100%.
And that prisoner's dilemma problem requires that only the U.S. government can step in. While we want to partner with private sector, it requires deep leadership on behalf of the U.S. government who says these practices will no longer be tolerated, full stop.
We've got to put the pedal, and to a certain extent in the pharmaceutical space, we've also got to hold India accountable. One of the reasons why we have upward pressure on prices is because we're being undermined by counterfeit drugs coming across the border and pretending, number one, they do not stand up to the same safety standards. Number two, they're undermining the intellectual property protections of, generally speaking, U.S. biotech. I'll have other questions for the record, but I appreciate it. Look forward to supporting your nomination. Mr. Tyer, I come in on the back end of the discussion with Senator Grassley on congressional intent. When we're around here, sometimes you pass a bill, it's 30, 40 years done, and people are wondering what Congress intended. We only passed a big, beautiful bill about 4 weeks ago. So people who voted on that bill are here, and there was very clear congressional intent with respect to the transition strategy on some of the renewable energy projects. To be honest with you, I'm not surprised. In full disclosure, I voted against the bill for reasons other than the renewable energy. But it already looks like we're kind of moving away from congressional intent, particularly from the Senate, and something that was more baked into a predisposition from the Freedom Caucus in the House. Can I get your commitment to make sure that when there's any doubt about congressional intent on the energy provisions of the big, beautiful bill, that you actually consult with those of us who were dealt with the drafting of it?
Thank you, Senator. And there is a cadre of very skilled, expert, impressive technical and appointee staff in the Office of Tax Policy. They have the mandate of implementing the one big, beautiful bill. And if confirmed, look forward to working with you and your team on that.
Well, there's a few things that seem to be popping up that run afoul of, there were some people that may have voted against it if they thought that they were going to be having discussions about congressional intent 4 weeks later. So I hope we can avoid having that sort of erosion of trust as we go and implement it and do it in good faith. Thank you. I look forward to supporting all your nominations.
Thank you. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to you all. And thanks for allowing us to be up and down and in and out during votes. Mr. Schwitzer, I want to come to you because I think protecting U.S. innovation is something that is vitally important. And I know a couple of times this morning you've been asked about IP protections. And when we look at some of the trade deals that are being executed, and we look at China, and we look at, there are other people that are bad actors, other countries that are bad actors. I want you to talk for just a moment about how systematically you can approach protecting IP, because we're seeing it not only in the pharmaceutical space, as we looked at the active pharmaceutical ingredients, as we look at vaccines and things of that nature, but also as we utilize AI for predictive diagnosis and disease analysis and some of the health technology provisions that have come to be since I got the Software Act, which put health technology into federal statute when I was in the House. And so protecting this is going to be an imperative. So talk about that for me.
Well, thank you very much, Senator, and thank you for your previous work on the legislation. It's very important. Again, the president has made this a priority. He's mentioned China by name. He's mentioned, how other countries use drug pricing to undermine, really which is the intellectual property of our world-leading drug discovery firms. And Secretary Greer has spoken extensively about it. What I can say is, if confirmed, that this is a huge priority of mine. I have a very extensive background. I used to do innovation policy research at the University of California, San Diego for 2 years. At one point, I had every federal unclassified R&D grant between 1994 and 2002 on my home computer. I've literally read hundreds of thousands of short descriptions. It's a very complex problem, but it's one that's at the very top. If we don't continue to protect our IP, if we don't invest in research and development and IP, then we aren't going to continue to lead, be a leading economy or to lead the 21st century. So I will seek every opportunity and every tool available to ensure that I build it in and try to get the buy-in of the president and others and members of Congress, should it require statutory authority or legislative authority, to approve those agreements.
Well, we do think that it is going to be imperative to really bird dog this issue. And I know that Senator Daines talked with you about things that were in the big, beautiful bill, and restoring R&D and interest expensive bonus depreciation is all to help spur this innovation. And then as we look at the global marketplace, as we look at AI and innovation, it is going to be imperative that we do not cede any ground to our competitors or to adversaries. So thank you for that. Mr. Stewart, to you, and thank you for the work you've done as we've looked at fentanyl, opioid, and some of those things. We passed the Halt Fentanyl Act earlier. I know that you, in 2019, you formed a task force that demonstrated the importance of coordinated enforcement efforts as you're looking at fraud in Medicaid, Medicare, CHIP, and those programs. Now, as we worked on the big, beautiful bill, we found out that as much as 25% of Medicaid payments were improper payments and fraud. We know there's an issue with upcoding in Medicare. So talk with me about how that past work would support the work we're going to do here at this committee to try to get rid of this waste and fraud in these entitlement programs.
Well, thank you very much for the question, and I certainly look forward to working with members of this committee as we push forward on issues like Medicaid fraud or fraud in the healthcare sector. A lot of folks like to presume that there is no victim when it comes to a monetary fraud. Well, there are. It's the American taxpayers, and there's a limited bucket of money that's available for healthcare policy. I will form, and I've done this before, I think you referred to our abuse recovery and response team, because as a U.S. attorney in a district that had suffered so bad with respect to the fentanyl and opiate crisis, we knew that it was most important, at least my view was, that we bring both the civil team and the criminal team, multidisciplinary approach, so we could approach this with all information on deck, so we could make sure that both supply and demand were dealt with. But I plan to use those tools as a former prosecutor who had some pretty big results in terms of Medicaid fraud. The numbers to the American economy, it's dramatic. And Secretary Kennedy has said the public debt is a social determinant of public health. And so it's critically important that we do as efficiently as possible with the dollars that we have, the work that we have to do, because the recipients, legitimate recipients of programs like Medicaid, they need those dollars.
Okay.
So thank you for the question.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Barrasso.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Churello, congratulations. I want to congratulate you on this nomination. It's so clear your decades of public service, both in the House of Representatives and at the Federal Trade Commission, have prepared you well for the role which you've been nominated. As Assistant Secretary of Financial Resources, you're going to advise Secretary Kennedy on the Department of Health and Human Services budget, financial management, grant programs, and you're going to oversee their implementation. So this one big, beautiful bill that we just passed included a dedicated effort to help support rural health care through the creation of, as you know, the Rural Health Transformation Program. This program is going to provide over $500 million to each state to support our hospitals, clinics, and health centers. It's going to help ensure that health care facilities across rural and frontier Wyoming are going to continue to provide high-quality care close to home. Congressional Republicans designed this program specifically to avoid the red tape and the bureaucratic delays that often happen with government funding. So states can actually access these funds and quickly put them to work. So last week I was in Wyoming, visited with a number of healthcare providers, including the head of the Wyoming Hospital Association. And the questions they ask is, as you oversee the distribution of this Rural Health Transformation Program funds, how are you going to ensure that states can access the funds efficiently?
Well, thank you, Senator, for the question, and thank you on this topic that is near and dear to my heart. I grew up in Cooperstown, New York. My mother was a nurse at our local hospital. My first job as a teenager was volunteering there. And healthcare has been a passion of mine. And when I was at the FTC, I looked at lots of healthcare mergers in the rural space and looked at healthcare markets in general. And when I'm enthusiastic because of Secretary Kennedy's support for bolstering care in rural markets. The way I approach things as an antitrust lawyer is looking at how we can get the best quality services and care, most choices to people, to the consumers, at the lowest and most effective prices. So I will lean into the operating divisions that are handling the distribution of the funds and evaluating that, and bringing my competition principles to bear so that we can get the best quality solutions. Not all rural markets are created equal. They have different needs, and weighing in on those things and bringing, again, looking at my background, looking at different healthcare markets and hospital markets will be a priority of mine, and bringing that to the staff there.
Well, it sounds like then I can count on you to commit to working closely with the states as this program is rolled out.
I would expect that working with the states, and again, through the operating divisions that already have those relationships, to bolster the effectiveness of those.
Thank you. Mr. Schwitzer, I want to talk about Chinese uranium. You have considerable experience with China. I think it gives you unique insight into how they operate in global markets. I'm particularly concerned with how their deceptive trade practices, of which you're very familiar, threaten our critical nuclear supply chain. In 2024, Congress banned Russian uranium imports to protect our national security, but now it seems that China is helping Russia circumvent the ban and undermine American nuclear fuel producers. We ban Russia, Russia gives it to China, China to the United States. Just this year, China has already exported over 150,000 pounds of uranium to the United States. We have clear evidence that this is Russian-enriched uranium going to China, which they then dump into the U.S. market. So we're just kind of swapped one adversary for another. Wyoming has the resources, the workforce to rebuild the American nuclear supply chain. State-subsidized Russian and Chinese uranium undermines our domestic industry. Can you commit to working with Congress to end this Chinese circumvention of our Russian uranium ban? And do you have any thoughts on the matter?
Yes, Senator, thank you for the question. It's a very important issue. What I'm concerned about the entirety of the critical mineral supply chain, including uranium. I commit to working with Congress. I think there are aspects of this that USTR can do. There are aspects of this that maybe executive order could look at. But there are always, especially if you want sort of binding long-term solutions, Congress is where you look to find those kinds of solutions. So like Ambassador Greer, I commit to working with you and finding any way possible to address these issue sets. We need the ability to supply critical minerals, including uranium, in the United States wherever possible, to process those profitably wherever possible. And where not possible, we want to be sourcing those from friendly nation states and allies and partners.
Great. Last week we had Secretary Wright, Secretary of Energy in Wyoming, since you mentioned critical minerals in addition to uranium, for the groundbreaking of the first critical minerals and elements mine in the country in 70 years. And my concern, of course, is we don't want to be dependent upon anybody for that. So how will you work with our Asian allies to counter China's domination in terms of global critical minerals?
Yeah, I've had the opportunity. I was in charge of our economic relationship with Japan. I was the economic affairs chief on the Japan desk many years back, and I worked closely across Southeast Asia. The government of Japan is very interested in actually partnering with us on this. My understanding, again, I'm not in yet, so I don't know the specifics, but my understanding of the U.S.-Japan trade agreement is that there's a $550 billion of pledged financing to go into these sorts of projects. So what we look to do is how can we work with countries like Japan, with governments like Wyoming, with folks like Mountain Pass and others who actually do this processing, and the Department of Defense, who can then fund some of this But what we need is a holistic supply chain. We need from mine to final product, and not just defense products. We need them to go into our cars, into our planes, and that's how you get a long-term, sustainable, efficient, competitive supply chain across the board.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for each of the panelists. Thank you all for being here. Do you commit to follow the law? Mr. Schwitzer?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Churello?
I commit to following the law, yes.
Mr. Stewart?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Tyer?
Yes, I'll follow the law.
Appreciate that. Mr. Churello, Mr. Stewart, measles was declared eliminated in the United States back in 2000 thanks to the vaccine. But today, the United States measles cases have hit their highest level in more than 3 decades, 30 years. I ask both of you, yes or no, do you believe the measles vaccine is safe and effective? Mr. Churello?
I support what Secretary Kennedy has said, that the best way to prevent the measles, is through the measles vaccine.
Is that a yes?
As I said, I'm not a vaccinologist, and so I support what the science says.
So you're not willing to say yes or no, but you're willing to say that you agree with the Secretary, even though you say you're not an expert in this space?
Well, I'll tell you how I approach vaccines as a parent.
No, sir, that's not my question. My question is just a very simple one. If it's not yes or no, that's your answer. Respect that, Mr. Stewart?
Just repeat your question, because...
Yes, sir. Yes or no, do you believe the measles vaccine is safe and effective?
The best way to protect yourself from measles in America today is by getting a vaccine. Secretary Kennedy has said that. That's what I believe. I'm not a medical expert, but I believe the best way to protect yourself from measles in America today is by getting a vaccine.
My follow-up, sir, is that a yes or a no?
Well...
Okay, it's not either. I respect your answer. Thank you very much. Do you believe, yes or no? I'll try one more time. One more yes or no question. Mr. Churello, yes or no, is the vaccine the best way to prevent measles? I think I heard it in your first answer, but it's just a simple yes or no.
I understand that I'm not a vaccinologist, and I'm not qualified to say what is the best way to prevent. That's just not my background or training, but I understand that the science is saying that the best way to protect yourself against measles is through the vaccine.
I'll accept that. That's a good answer. I appreciate that. Mr. Stewart?
So I agree with his answer on this.
Very good. We're in agreement there. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate that. Mr. Churello, Mr. Stewart, in New Mexico, there are currently 207 Head Start centers in operation serving 7,342 children. Mr. Stewart, do you know what Head Start is?
I do.
Mr. Churello?
I apologize, I didn't understand.
Do you know what Head Start is?
Oh, Head Start, yes.
Appreciate that. These centers are crucial in serving rural communities. President Trump has undermined the stability of the Head Start program by withholding nearly $1 billion in federal funding that Congress has already appropriated, including funding specific to New Mexico. Now, I've heard directly from Head Start Child and Family Services in Lee County in New Mexico about the period of uncertainty they experienced earlier this year due to the federal hold on Head Start funding, leaving them unable to draw down funds for payroll. This placed a severe strain on staff members, some whom expressed they would leave for more stable employment as they could not afford to risk a missed paycheck. While Lee County was fortunate to have reserves, further delays in funding could have devastated impacts on their operations and the future of early childhood education. So just last week, as you may be aware, GAO found that the administration violated the law by withholding Head Start funds. My question again is a yes or no. Do you believe it's against the law to delay or withhold Head Start funding that Congress has already appropriated? Mr. Churello?
Again, as I've testified already, that my lodestar as an attorney is I follow the law. And by looking at the law, you look at the statute with appropriations in this case, but the facts are, and if there are any other case holdings on there. And so my approach here, to answer questions like that, will be to follow the law. You're asking questions that I believe are in dispute through litigation. So I think that those questions are unanswered as to what the law is.
Appreciate that. Mr. Stewart, you have an incredible background in legal responsibilities. You're charged with being the chief legal counsel for Health and Human Services. You're the expert. You know the law better than most. Yes or no?
Well, if confirmed, and I
You're going to be
appreciate this
confirmed.
question. So I'm a lawyer who likes to have all the facts and all the information before me in terms of these matters. In every instance, and I have a long career on this, is I will always recommend that we follow the law.
Yes, sir.
And that we do things correctly. But I'm not at HHS right now. I don't know the facts and circumstances behind any of these decisions that were made.
Are you familiar with the laws that govern health and human services?
Reasonably so, yes.
So are you the best person for this job?
I am the best person for this
So
job.
you're the
Listen,
expert.
I bring a wide variety
So
of
you're the
big
expert.
background to this.
You are the expert then. You are the best person for this job.
I'm going to have a great team with me.
But you're not familiar with all the laws that govern HHS, you just said.
It's an incredibly wide breadth of capability within the Department of Health and Human Services. And so am I an expert at every single subject? No. But I bring a wide swath of experience, and I'm going to have a great team around me so that we can make sure on every subject we bring capable expertise to be able to provide the recommendations that are needed by Secretary Kennedy and the administration to make the right decision.
I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. I have other questions. I'll submit them into the record. But once you're confirmed, because I know how to count, basic arithmetic matters around this place, I'll follow up in writing in your official capacities and re-ask the questions. They're going to be simple yes or no, shouldn't take you more than a few minutes to work with whoever's on your team that are the experts just to simply respond yes or no. I hope that we can get those in a timely fashion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Lujan. So to our panel, you've had a good full 2-hour hearing today, and the good news is that there won't be any more questions from the dais. Senator Wyden would like to make give some closing remarks, and then I'll give some closing remarks, and we'll cut you loose.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that, and I'll be very brief. Mr. Stewart, let me give you my reaction, because I think you heard me say I invite you to supplement, whatever you said. You want to be the top lawyer at HHS. It's one of the most significant legal positions, in the country. I was co-director of the Oregon Gray Panthers and ran a little legal aid office for senior citizens, and we'd always talk about, you have to go to the HHS office in order to get the definitive opinion. I asked you 3 times about EMTALA, which is a hugely important law for hospital emergency rooms. And it's become particularly confusing under the Trump administration to the point where women are suffering, some are dying, and I describe it as contributing to this. The doctors play lawyers and the lawyers play doctors. And you gave me an incomprehensible set of comments, a word salad by any kind of assessment. And I hope that you can get me something more concrete in terms of a formal answer, because what you said verbally is an affirmation of something I heard over the weekend when I were having town hall meetings in rural Oregon. And that is, Americans are looking at what was done in this reconciliation bill and walking away and saying, your health care is not safe under Donald Trump. And certainly the answer you gave me with respect to EMTALA confirms that. And to be fair, I wanted to give you a chance to come back with a more thoughtful response, one that actually protects women who are in these dangerous situations. But I wanted to tell you, I found the answers that you gave me before and the way you tackled it disturbing and not befitting the General Counsel. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. And to our panel, again, thank you all for coming. And we appreciated your responsiveness to the questions that you were asked. We will be moving as rapidly as we can to get you to the floor and to get this all resolved. The next step will be for the committee to have an opportunity to have a business meeting and put your nominations out to the floor. I'm going to encourage all my colleagues to vote in favor of that. You are all highly qualified. I appreciate you stepping up to serve. And with that, this hearing is adjourned.